You're standing in line at a cafe at 8:17 in the morning. The person in front of you orders something complicated you don't even bother listening to. You already know your order anyway. Small, familiar, automatic. $12 and change. You tap your card before you even fully think about it. And here's the strange part. You don't feel like you just lost $12. You feel like nothing happened. But later that same day, you check your bank account and wonder why it still feels like you're stuck at the same number you were last month. Same stress, same margin, same quiet pressure in your chest when rent week comes around. And what you're about to understand is that it was never about the coffee. It's about what that $12 is quietly training your brain to do. Because here's where it gets interesting. Most people think financial progress is about income. More money in, problem solved. But there's a hidden threshold that matters way more than how much you earn. And until you cross it, your financial life doesn't actually feel like it's improving no matter what your salary says. And that threshold is not $100,000. It's not even $10,000 saved. It's something smaller, more invisible, and way more powerful. But we'll come back to that. Because right now, you're not just buying coffee. You're participating in a pattern that quietly delays your first real financial milestone, your first $10,000. And most people never connect those two things. The problem isn't that you're spending $12. The problem is what happens when that $12 repeats without resistance. Because let's be honest, it's not just coffee. It's food delivery when you're tired. It's just one app subscription. It's convenience purchases that feel too small to matter. Individually, they're harmless, almost invisible, but your brain doesn't track financial reality and logic. It tracks repetition. And every time you make a low-friction purchase without hesitation, you're reinforcing a very specific identity. I don't need to optimize. And that identity is expensive. Because people who reach their first $10,000 don't get there by earning dramatically more. They get there by crossing a behavioral line where spending is no longer automatic. But here's the thing most people miss. That $12 coffee isn't just a cost. It's a signal. It tells your brain, we are the type of person who doesn't pause here. And that signal gets reinforced hundreds of times per month. Now zoom out for a second. $12 a day doesn't sound dangerous. But multiply it. $12 times 5 days a week is $60. Times 4 weeks is $240 a month. Times 12 months is $2,880 a year. And now we're not talking about coffee anymore. We're talking about nearly $3,000 quietly exiting your system without resistance. And here's where the threshold matters. Because for most people earning between $35,000 and $85,000 a year, $3,000 is not just extra money. It's the difference between having a financial buffer and constantly feeling behind. But let's go deeper, because the real shift isn't the math. It's what happens psychologically when you stop that pattern. Something strange happens when you start redirecting even half of those small leaks. At first, nothing changes emotionally. You still feel like the same person. You still check your balance the same way. But after a few weeks, your brain starts noticing something subtle. Your account stops dropping as fast. And that creates a new feeling most people have never experienced consistently. Stability. And stability is not just financial. It's neurological. Because your brain is constantly scanning for threat signals related to money. When money leaves unpredictably, your stress system stays active. But when outflow becomes controlled, even at small levels, your brain starts to downshift. And this is the part nobody talks about. The first $10,000 isn't just a number. It's the point where your brain stops treating money as something that disappears instantly. But let's make it concrete. Imagine you take just $150 a month of those small leaks and redirect them. Not increase your income. Just redirect leakage. That's $1,800 a year. Now imagine that money sitting in a simple savings account earning nothing. No investing even yet. In about 5 to 6 years, you've built $10,000 almost passively. But here's where it gets interesting. The real acceleration doesn't come from saving. It comes from behavior after you start seeing progress. Because once you cross even $2,000 or $3,000, your decision-making changes. You hesitate more before spending. Not because you're restricting yourself, but because you now have something to lose. And that psychological shift is where momentum begins. Now let's layer in the compounding effect. If instead of letting that $150 leak every month, you invested it with a modest average return, the difference over 10 years becomes not just thousands, but tens of thousands. But again, the math is not the main point. The real transformation is this. You stop being someone who leaks money by default, and you start becoming someone who allocates it intentionally. Now apply this back to the cafe moment. You don't need to eliminate coffee, but you do need to notice what happens internally when spending becomes automatic. Because automatic spending is what keeps you financially flat. Not because the amounts are large, but because the behavior never gets interrupted. And once behavior never gets interrupted, identity never updates. So what does real-world application look like? First, you don't start by cutting everything. That backfires. Instead, you identify 3 repeat spending patterns. Usually it's coffee, food delivery, and subscription drift. Then you don't eliminate them. You delay them. A 24-hour pause rule. Not to punish yourself, but to break the automatic loop. Second, you redirect just one category of leakage. Not all. One. Even if it's only $50 to $100 a month. That becomes your proof account. A visible signal that you're no longer operating on autopilot. Third, you stop measuring success by income changes for a moment and start measuring by days without unconscious spending. Because that metric quietly predicts everything else. But there's a trap here. And this is where most people fail even after they understand all of this. They try to optimize perfectly for 2 weeks, get tired, and snap back harder than before. Because they treated financial behavior like a sprint, not a system. Real change is not about intensity. It's about reducing friction in the direction you want to go and increasing friction in the direction you don't. If you don't design that, your environment will design it for you. And your environment is currently optimized for convenience, not accumulation. So if you feel like you've been stuck at the same financial level for a while, it's probably not because you're doing something wrong. It's because nothing is interrupting the pattern long enough for a new identity to form. Now zoom out one last time. The goal was never to demonize a $12 coffee. The goal was to show you what it represents when it becomes unconscious. Because the moment you start noticing where your money goes without awareness, something shifts. You stop being just a participant in your financial life, and you start becoming the editor of it. And that's the real threshold, not $10,000 in your account. But the moment you realize your money is no longer leaving your life without your permission. And once that shift happens, the first $10,000 stops being a goal and starts becoming inevitable. Would you like me to generate line-by-line image prompts for this script, or direct text-to-video prompt for the visuals through AI?